I'm in the shop today working on a micro wedding, which is getting picked up tomorrow morning. So I'm making one bouquet and one boutonniere, and usually I do that the night before the pickup. So I'm going to just take you through how I create a wedding bouquet and a matching boutonniere for a micro wedding. So first thing I'm going to do is just lay out all of my materials. I've been doing weddings for almost 20 years. Micro weddings right now are my favorite kind of wedding, actually the only kind of wedding I'm doing. This is just personal flowers that get picked up at my shop. I used to do really large weddings with installations and deliveries and coming back in the middle of the night, but that is behind me now. And now I am focused on just a few small, intimate weddings that people pick up at our shop and don't require me to go out and do any sort of deliveries. So today I am making one bridal bouquet, and the bride's color palette, she really wanted to have a lot of orange and peachy orange tones. And this is like my favorite time of year for bridal bouquets because we get to use both dahlias and mums. This is, like I call it, crossover season. So I have some dahlias and mums both as focal flowers, which is awesome. We have not had a frost yet in our area, so we are just still using fall flowers. We haven't gone into deep fall yet. So I'm just laying these elements out so that it's easier for me to see what I'm working with and also to create my bouquet faster. I've already cleaned all of the stems. So you can see that all the stems I've taken off all the leaves. I usually do that, I did this yesterday. So I usually try to clean all of the stems in advance of me making the bouquet because it takes too long to do both together. So I've cleaned all the stems, mostly cleaned them all. And now I'm just laying them all out. So now that I've got everything laid out, I'm going to give you sort of a behind the scenes look of how I do this. I like to have everything laid out in front of me, and then I'm thinking about the pictures, the inspiration pictures that the client has shared with me. So she sent me 3 pictures, and they all were in the same color palette. They had some cream and neutral colors. They had a lot of peachy orange, and then some dark reddish wine color. So I've reviewed those, and I'm taking those into account as I am making my design. She also said that she wanted a lot of foliage. So right now I'm using a lot of this eucalyptus. It's really long and is going to give me that sort of look of a full foliage bouquet. And then I'm also using a little bit of this Edward Goucher Abelia, which is really pretty too. So this is how I do every bouquet. I lay everything out and then get started. So I'm going to start with a strong piece of foliage, this eucalyptus. I'm going to start with that. And I'm making this bouquet in a very natural style. That's what the client requested. That for me means letting the flowers do what they do naturally. I'm not forcing them into any sort of round ball. I'm just letting them do what they do naturally. So I'm going to be creating it in a natural style. I'm also going to be using a spiral technique for my bouquet. And spiral techniques just give me a really balanced feel. So if you have never seen a spiral technique, what I'm going to do is I start with my non-dominant hand, so I'm right-handed. I'm going to hold this foliage in my non-dominant hand, and then I'm just going to cross this over, making an X. So every time I place a stem, I'm going to place it in this X formation. Then once I have it on there, I'm going to give it a quarter turn. And you can see that I didn't just turn my wrist, I turned the actual whole bouquet. So that the next stem that I put on there is going to have this same crossover method. So I've started with foliage, a line flower, and a focal flower. I like to have a mix of elements, and you can check out the 6 elements that I always use in arrangements in my video, 6 elements. I'll link it in the description. And that will show you all of these elements: foliage, line flower, focal flower, secondary focal, filler, and bits and pieces. I'm going to be using all of those today. So now that I've got my dahlia in, I'm going to go for another. This is amaranth. This is hot chili amaranth, so I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to turn. I know that sometimes people think when they make that turn that it's going to screw up the shape of their design. I don't worry about that so much in the beginning. If I obsess about it, it's too early to obsess about it. So I'm just going to start placing my stems, and I have bunched sort of my oranges together so that I have a little bit of color blocking there. I don't want everything to feel so dotted. So I'm going to next put in, I've got some cosmos. Got some cosmos here that I'm going to use, and a little bit of sea oats. And this is going to add a real like whimsical feel. So I'm giving my bouquet a turn. And then I'm going to just go through my elements again. I've got stock, which is my line flower. And then I'm going to use dahlia. And sometimes once you get the hang of this, like I will put a couple stems in at once and then make my turn. So in the beginning, if you're just learning, I do suggest just putting one in at a time, but I usually do a couple at a time. I also have a little bit of straw flower, and straw flower is going to come in handy later because when I make my boutonniere, I want to have some of the same elements in the bouquet that is in the boutonniere. So as I'm going, I'm not worrying again too much about the placement. I can always pull things out or adjust things. I just want to get my flowers in here now. So I'm making my turn. The Abelia is pretty branchy, so I want to leave that pretty high up in the design. I'm really letting it be branchy and sort of wild. And I'm keeping a pretty loose grip on my stems. Sometimes I'll see when people are making spiral bouquets, they really are using like a death grip. Like they're holding it with their whole fist. You don't have to hold it with your whole fist. I like to just let things be really loose and not have my fingers crunching those stems, just letting it be really loose and light and airy. And I am keeping things at some different heights just so that I have a little bit of a more natural feel. I don't want everything to feel really rounded or like an ice cream cone. I want things to feel loose. And you can see that this goes a lot faster since I have all of my stems cleaned. When I was first starting out doing weddings like 20 years ago, I didn't really know that that's what you should do. So I would just get all my flowers and I would be cleaning one at a time as I was placing them in the bouquet. That is a time suck. It really does not help to do it that way. It's better, I think, to just clean everything the day before or in advance of creating the bouquet. And then when it's time to make the bouquet, all you have to do is place the stems where they want to be placed. So again, you can see I'm keeping a nice loose grip. And this can take a little while. So my arm, I know I am a weakling. However, your arm can get tired. So I might trim some of these stems, not crazy short, but just taking some of the weight off of it so that my hand is a little lighter. So you can see still nice and loose. These mums I'm using today are some of my favorite mums so far of the season. I got them from one of our growers, Winter's Farm Florals, and she actually did not know the name of it. She said all of her mums got jumbled in the field. And so while it did have a tag on it, Anzac, when we looked it up, it did not look like this. So I'm not actually even sure what this mum is, but it is a beautiful peachy orange gold, which is perfect for this bouquet. So just keep turning. When I use things like sea oats, anything that has this sort of whimsical look, I want to make sure that I'm popping it out nice and tall so that it doesn't get lost. It is kind of small, and I don't want it to get lost in my bouquet. And anything like this amaranth that has like this curve in its stem, I want to play into that. I want to use it so that it is hanging off of the edge here. Just let it do what it does naturally. I'm not trying to force it into a straight up stem. Just let it droop. This is our first week back for stock. We have stock in the spring and then again in the fall and early winter. Stock is very fragrant. It's like spicy smelling and I love it. And it's a great line flower for this time of year. It adds a really pretty scent. All right, so everything's looking good so far. I have a little bit, you can see a little bit of a hole here. So I want to make sure that as I'm filling, I'm making sure that this hole is filled in. And it's okay to slide things through the middle of the bouquet if I need to. Sometimes I'll do that as I'm getting towards the end, just to make sure that those holes are filled in. All right, I do want, you can see this dahlia has a little bit of a curve in its stem, and I like that, but I don't want this to break off while the bride is carrying it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a piece of foliage or two pieces of foliage right in front of it as kind of a buffer to hold it in place. It's just, that gives it a little more stability so that it doesn't break off. Because you know, when people, especially they're picking up here at the shop, and then they're driving these flowers to the ceremony or wherever they're getting their pictures taken. And there's a lot of jostling of the bouquet. It's moving around a lot. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't have any breakage. And the bride did want a lot of green, so I am including a lot of greenery. The Abelia is cool because it does have a little bit of a peachy, rusty pink edge, which really, I think, goes well with this bouquet. So now you can see that my hand is starting to, my fingers are starting to come into play here as I'm holding this bouquet, because no longer do my fingers create a death grip. They're just giving me support because there's so many stems. And you can see that the spiral bouquet method gives you these flayed out stems at the bottom. And that's what really allows your bouquet to be like wide and natural, because anytime you're holding it like this, you can see that contraction, right? So if you hold it tighter, it contracts, but if you're loose with it, it will stay pretty loose. All right, so now as I'm getting towards the end, I want to think about if I have to move anything around or if there's going to be a front to the bouquet. Because when I hand off the bouquet to the client, I want to make sure that I show them and tell them how to hold it. So I'm going to just do a little review of the bouquet and say, okay, I think this is the front. I'm going to say that's the front. So I want to make sure that I am filling in this front as sort of the focal. Now, of course, I'm going to make sure that the bouquet looks great on all sides. I'm not going to leave any sides undone because just in case the client carries it a different way or the photographer takes a picture of it a different way, I'm not going to leave anything to chance. All right, now this mum, I want to show you. There's 3 stems on this mum, and I just left them as 3 because I did not want to cut one off, but I do need to cut one off. It's too heavy and too big for this bouquet as it is. So I'm going to trim one of the stems off, and then I'm going to just see if I can get away with using 2, which I think I can. So that actually works pretty well because I'm trying always to avoid eyeballs. So even though these 2 are facing the same direction, they are not on the same plane. So I feel pretty good about using those there. I can also always put a little bit of a foliage buffer between them. So now I'm just filling in as this is the front that we're going to see. And even though I'm just filling in now, I am keeping with that spiral shape. So I don't want my stems to look wonky. I'm going to fill in a little bit here in the back. All right, I'm going to add a few more of these sea oats. Sometimes when I'm in the shop making a bouquet and we have other designers in the shop, I will do a little test with them and just say, take a look at it. I'll just show them, here's how I picture the bride holding it. What do you think? What needs to be adjusted? Is there any holes? But when I'm by myself, I'll either use a camera, so I'll take a picture or a video of myself holding it, or I'll use a stand-up mirror where I can just stand in front of the mirror and then I can adjust it myself to make sure everything looks the way I want it to look. So if you're by yourself, like I am, you can just use a camera to take a little video or a picture, or if you're with a friend, have them adjust it for you. And if I need to move anything up or down, I just keep my hands nice and loose so that I can adjust the height without damaging anything. All right, that was my little cutoff one. This will probably go in a bud vase to bring to my house. And I'll just put these last little cosmos in because I don't want to waste any of these. They're so pretty. All right. All right, so now I've got it finished off and I have to tape it up. So I'm going to use my floral tape. One moment. All right, so to tape it, I want to tape right where my hand is, right where the person is going to carry this bouquet. And there's fat floral tape and there's skinny floral tape. For right now, I'm going to use the fat white one because I'm going to use like a, like a creamy ribbon wrap on it. So I'm just going to use this one and rip off a piece. All right, so to wrap my tape, I'm just putting it under my thumb, getting it started, and twisting. And I'm just checking it out as I go to make sure there's nothing weird. This tape is only sticky if you pull it really tight, so I'm just pulling it really tight. And I'm going to trim just the ends a little bit because it's heavy. And then I want to get a look at it. If I need to adjust anything, I'm going to just adjust now. Even with the tape on, I can still go in and adjust because the tape is not so tight that it doesn't allow me to do that. Try not to tweak it too much, but sometimes I don't know, futz around with it too much. So once it's taped, I'm going to just put it aside in a bouquet vase, just a cylinder vase full of water. Until I am ready to wrap it with ribbon. I'm not ready yet. I have to do the boutonniere first, and then I will go back but I want to let this just sit in water for a little while so it can drink up, because the flowers have been out of water for a little while. So I'm just going to let that drink up for a little while. So I just pop it back in my bouquet vase. The stems are nice and long. I'm not going to leave it like this. I mean, this looks crazy, but I'm just going to leave it in here to drink up a little bit while I make my boutonniere. All right, so for my boutonniere, what I'm thinking about for the boutonniere is I like to have some elements that are in the bouquet in the boutonniere, because obviously you want them to like look coordinated and look nice together. And so I almost always start with rosemary. This rosemary is just from my own garden, and I use rosemary for a couple reasons. One, because it is so good for not wilting. It is so sturdy, it's so tough, it has a woody stem, and it just looks like this all the time. You can wear it on your lapel and crush it. Doesn't do anything. It doesn't get damaged. So it's perfect for a boutonniere. So what I do is just try to lay out my material so I know what I'm working with. So I'm going to use rosemary. I'm going to use this straw flower, which is the same straw flower that I used in the bouquet. I'm going to use this little bit of celosia, which I did not use in the bouquet because honestly, I only had one piece of this. Sometimes using local flowers means that you get like a handful of things instead of like a bunch of 10 or 5 bunches of 10. I just had one piece of celosia, but it's perfect because you can see it matches this, this dahlia color great. So I'm going to use that. And then my focal flower for this boutonniere is going to be this ball dahlia. This is Cornell bronze, and it's a perfect dahlia for boutonnieres. Great size, and yeah, it's great. And then lastly, I'm going to put in a little bit of this sea oats, which just again complements the bouquet. So I just lay out my little materials here. It's great. I mean, you can see I'm using full-size stems for a couple of these things. This is like a broken stem. It's great if I have like broken things or short things or side shoots that I just stick away in a vase until I'm ready to make my boutonnieres, because that way I don't have to cut like a full stem. I can use something that's broken or short. So I'm going to prepare my stems just the same way I do when I make my bouquet. Clean all the leaves off of it. And the boutonniere is like a little tiny bouquet. It's like whoever's wearing the boutonniere, this is a little miniature bouquet. So I'm going to make it basically the same way, like a little cluster of things put together. So I've got my rosemary, and then I'm going to use my celosia as kind of a backdrop. And then my dahlia as the focal flower. The straw flower, this is sort of a little accent. And I'm going to use actually a little more rosemary. Sometimes it takes me a couple tries, honestly, to get the exact shape right. And I'll add things or take things off. Texture and a little more buffer between each of the flowers. Okay, that's looking good. And then my sea oats, I'm going to cut this into a couple little pieces here. I'm laying this down because I want to think about what I'm doing with these sea oats. They were too long as one piece. I mean, you're not going to put like a piece like this in a boutonniere. So I've cut them into some small pieces, but now I'm thinking, how am I going to use them? I think what I'll do is I'll tape a few short pieces together. See how that works. On occasion, I will tape like 2 pieces together or 3 pieces together and then add it into the boutonniere, because it can just gives me a little more control over where things are. I'm just using this as the 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch floral tape, and I'll link all of these materials in the notes. I'll link the tape and the ribbon and even my clippers, which I know somebody asked about recently. Sabaton 1210 favorite clippers. I'll link those in the show notes. All right, so I'm basically starting over again. So I've got my rosemary again and put it together. I think sometimes people think like, why do you charge what you charge for a boutonniere? Like I charge $25 for a boutonniere. People might be thinking like, well, why do you charge $25? It's such a small little thing. But I want to make sure that I have the exact right materials. It does take, a few different materials, but also I kind of remake this like several times to make sure I get it right. I really want to make sure that I'm giving like the same amount of attention to the boutonniere as I am to the bouquet. So now I have this little cluster and I can kind of figure out where it can go. I can kind of put it on the bottom. I don't know if I really like that. Or have it a little bit taller in the background. Actually, I think I kind of like it like that. Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay, so I've got it now in the background. It's not as droopy in this way, but I think I like it better that way. All right, so once I get everything in place, then I go ahead and get ready to tape. And I'm going to use this skinny tape. And again, just starting at the top here, wrapping around. And the tape does give the stems a little bit of support too. All right, so that's how it's going to look. I'm going to trim the bottom here, kind of short. So I don't like, sometimes I see boutonnieres that have really long stems. I don't really like really long stems. I think below the tape, I leave just like maybe a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, nothing more than that. Doesn't need to be longer than that. So then I'm going to wrap it in ribbon, and for both of these bouquet and boutonniere, I'm going to use just an ivory neutral ribbon. I have a ton of ribbon, but I think for this, just like a neutral ivory will do the job and just be simple and kind of blend in with the design. right, so my materials for my boutonniere wrap is my ribbon. I have some straight pins, and I have a ribbon scissors. I try never to use like clippers or something for ribbon. You really want something sharp. So, and again, I'll link these in the show notes. So this is, let's see, this is 3/8 inch wide ribbon. This is, for me, like the perfect size for boutonniere ribbon. There are a little bit thicker, but I don't know, this one works for me. So I'm starting at the bottom. Usually with my tape, I start at the top. This I start at the bottom. I don't know why. That's how I do it. And I'm making sure that I'm covering all of the tape. I'm just wrapping up the stem. And wrapping all the way up to the top. I don't want to see any tape. That drives me crazy. It's like a pet peeve of mine to see the tape, because I feel like it means you just weren't taking care or being careful with the details. So I am going to, let's see. I'm going to cut this ribbon and I'm going to leave it a little long. Now this is a little bit hard to see, but I'll show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen up my ribbon at the top and then slide this tail through, leaving like this tail here. So this allows me to not use any glue. I mean, sometimes I use glue, but I prefer not to because it's a mess. And this is just like a quicker, easier way. So I just looped it through there, and then I'm going to trim the end short on an angle so it just looks nice. All right, and then I'm going to add 2 boutonniere pins. I've had a million disasters with boutonnieres where I've either forgotten to put the pins in, the client has lost the pins or broken the pins. I've had a time when I used a magnet and only had the front of the magnet and not the back, so there was no way to attach it. So right now I always put 2 pins in. You really only need 1 pin to attach it to a lapel. So this is sort of a backup, but also you could use 2 just to keep it really secure. I will often tell the people when they get here to just make a note that there are 2 pins in here so that they know when they put it on, they can use 2 to really secure it. So now that I've got it on there, I'm just going to make sure that my ends are nice and cleanly cut. Give it a nice trim. And then I'm going to keep it in the cooler overnight. And I know that there are people that use hydration chambers and all sorts of other ways to keep their boutonnieres hydrated overnight. I've never had a problem when I'm using materials that I know are going to hold up by just putting them in like a little clamshell container, a little plastic clamshell container, and keeping it in the cooler overnight. So I'm going to do that with this one. And then I'm going to wrap my bouquet. So I pulled out 2 ribbon, which I'm torn on. This is the May Arts double-faced satin. This is what I always use. This is like my standard go-to ribbon for bouquets. It's the same as the boutonniere ribbon, but just thicker. But this one, this is the same width, which is 2 inches. This is the same width, but you can see it's a little more, I don't know, it's like more delicate, more interesting. So what I might do, that's also why I use the white tape on this, because I didn't want the green tape to show through with a cream or an ivory wrap. So I think what I'll do, you can see I took it out and now my tape is like a little frayed or a little weird. So I'm gonna, before I put the ribbon on, I'm gonna put one more piece of tape over that, just to smooth it out. I don't want any weird ends. So just going over this one more time. and then sticking it on there and then just trimming off anything that's weird. This tape sticks to itself, so you just have to make sure you pull it tight and then hold it on there. All right, so I think what I'll do is I'm gonna give this one a try. I don't know why it feels weird to me. It feels like it's like too thin. Like it should be an overlay to something, but I'm gonna try it just as it's. So you can see that it's almost just as thick as the tape, which is great because I can just hold it over the whole piece of tape and then wrap it around. And I wanna make sure I don't get any green. Sometimes when you're wrapping, there's like leaves in the way. You don't wanna get any green leaf mush on the ribbon. So I'm just pulling it tight, keeping it nice and straight. And then I'm looking where my front is because that is where I'm gonna put the pins. Some people put the pins in the back. I don't know, doesn't really matter. They're mostly decorative. I mean, it holds the ribbon together, but they're mostly decorative. But it is a way for me to tell the person who's getting the bouquet where the pins are is the front. Or I guess if you did it in the back, you could say the back. But for me, I put them in the front. I've also now wrapped it like 10 times because I just want to make sure I have the front right. All right, so this is going to be my front. So I'm just going to trim off my ribbon and I'm going to leave it a little bit long. Not that's too long. You can see using a ribbon scissors makes it a lot easier because you have a nice clean cut. So then I'm going to just fold my ribbon underneath itself. So there's a nice clean fold. And then I'm going to use same straight pins that I used for the boutonniere in here. And I usually do 3 and I put them in like at an angle. I'm not putting them straight through the bouquet because God forbid they go straight through and then they are pricking out the back and the person holds the bouquet and gets stabbed and then gets blood on their dress. That is one of the things I worry about. So I'm just gonna put it in at an angle and it should go in smoothly. If it gets stuck on like a woody stem, then I'll just adjust where it is because I don't want it, a lot of times I'll just bend like a couple pins before I figure out I should just move the pin. So I'm using 3 of these and putting them in at an angle. All right, so I've got my pins in. Make sure that that is the angle that I want to be the front. And now I'm just like zhuzhing it. Just making sure nothing feels too tight or crowded or weird. All right, then couple last things. I'm going to trim the stems so that they are just about an inch below the ribbon. Again, I do see people leave their stems really long, like even longer than this. And I guess it's a style, but for me, I think it looks crazy. And also, I want the person who's carrying the bouquet to carry it so that it's angled out a little bit so that the flowers are all showing this way. But if the stems are really long, they can't do that. So they have to carry it straight up and down. And then in the picture, what you see is a bunch of stems, which again, when I see those pictures at the end, I'm like, just drives me crazy. So I'm gonna trim these pretty short, so short that it's gonna probably feel uncomfortable. Whenever we have new designers here, I'll say start, with a little cut and then go up. So I'm gonna start. You can always make things shorter. You can never make things longer. So I'm not gonna go crazy. I'm just gonna chop off a lot of this. And then once I have kind of an idea of how, like this seems like a good length for me, maybe even a tiny bit shorter. Now I'm just gonna straighten out the stems because you can see those stems are wobbly. And this is a good way to test the bouquet. So I'm always trying to make the bouquet stand up on its own, which honestly could take several tries. So let me try. A lot of times what I do is like this a million times. I put it on the table, then try to like get my eye right at the stem level to see what is the stem that's causing it to be weird. This isn't fast. This is not a fast process. Or maybe if you had like a better eye for straight stems, it would be. There's also about 50 stems in here. I could count. About 50 stems, so they're all a little... And I can't keep trimming because I don't want it to get shorter and shorter and shorter. Boom. All right, there it is. So I've got my stems straight. What I'm gonna do last is change the water in my vase, and then I'm gonna just put about an inch of water in so that just the bottom of the stems are in water. I'm not gonna like fill it up and really let it drink. I'm just gonna put a little bit in there so that the whole ribbon and everything isn't getting soaking wet or sloshing around. And then I'm gonna pop it back in here and leave it in the cooler for it to soak up water tonight and get picked up tomorrow. If you liked watching me make this bouquet, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, like this video, and I also have a free weekly newsletter all about flowers. I talk more about design and all of the things that you saw here today. So there's a link in the profile. You can check it out.